So, James, global payments revenue is projected to grow to $2.4 trillion by 2029, and that's up from $1.9 trillion in 2024.
That's insane.
Isn't that insane? Yeah,
Uh,
this is according to Boston Consulting Group, which does these projections just about every year, and they're
right,
they're
right.
pretty on mark, you know.
Yeah.
So the industry is headed for a foundational reset, quote unquote, with AI, digital currencies, and fintech business models poised to shape the next wave of industry expansion. After growing 8.8% annually since 2019, revenue expansion is expected to slow to about 4% annually. But most of the slowdown is going to be deposit type transactions. Whereas, transaction-based revenues are going to be driving that growth, the payment and
Right, right.
transactions.
Okay.
Okay, some other predictions. Agentic AI is set to influence over 1 trillion in e-commerce spending.
Mm,
And here's something else. Payments fintechs generated $176 billion in revenue in 2024 and are growing at 23% annually.
mm.
Payments focused fintechs have attracted over 135 billion in equity funding over the past 25 years. They now make up 45% of total fintech revenue.
Wow. Mm,
And that doesn't totally surprise me. And it shouldn't surprise you either, I suppose, with
right,
the work that you're doing.
right.
But it just, that's a lot of money, man, you
It
know.
really is. It really is.
And then finally, this one I find really interesting. Real-time A to A payment volumes rose 40% globally in 2024. They now account for a quarter of digital retail payments worldwide, even exceeding 50% of transactions in some markets like Brazil.
Mm,
Now, that country's instant payment network, A to A network, PIX, by the way, has come under attack from the Trump administration, which alleges the network unfairly competes with U.S. firms like Visa and Mastercard.
mm,
Oh, and did I mention that 80% of Brazil's population uses PIX and it costs nothing to use?
mm.
Yeah, so Visa and Mastercard aren't too keen on that.
I wouldn't think.
You know, yeah, it's
So
and
what is the economic model for Pix? How do they make money?
well, I'm not sure they do because the government owns them. It was a
Oh,
government-owned
I see.
system, and that's one
I
of the
see.
reasons why the Trump administration is they had our trade representative is doing an investigation.
Mm,
They're saying it competes unfairly because the government owns it, and Visa and Mastercard are free market.
right,
But what Pix is saying is, look, we're domestic. We're not. You know,
right.
of course, Visa would love to have, that as part of its international market, but
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Brazil can kind of do what they want in their own country.
it's their
Um,
own country.
you
They
know, if
can
they
do
were
what
trying
they
to
want
bring
to
that
do.
network to the US, we would have a very serious problem with that. But they never
Right.
would because why would they? They're not making any money on it. So
They're not
it's
making any money on it.
yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Hmm.
Here's another just real quick one. Stable coins achieved an accumulated market value of $26 trillion last year.
Hmm.
However, quote, real world payments account for only 1% of that total. The market's heavily concentrated in facilitating crypto trading,
Hmm.
which, Boston Consulting doesn't consider real world
Yeah.
payments.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah.
No, nor do I. But so that's okay. So next up, JP Morgan made headlines, and not the good kind, this past summer when it announced plans to charge financial technology firms for accessing consumer data
Mm-hmm.
that previously had been providing for free.
Right.
Well, and the move was blasted by fintech groups and so forth. Well, the first domino has dropped, with Plaid agreeing to pay for accessing data from accounts of customers of Chase.
Wow, really?
Yeah, yeah. They
Interesting.
didn't know. They haven't mentioned how much they're going to pay, but they are going to pay. For background, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had adopted an open banking rule in 2023, which, among other things, would have required banks to make consumers' financial statements available to authorized third parties free of charge in standardized formats, of course.
Right.
But that rule was retracted once President Trump took office, and CFPB has sort of been pared back to bare minimum, and supposedly the rule is being rewritten, but nobody knows why. What exactly is going to happen. I think that's why J.P. Morgan wanted to kind of get up ahead of things, and
Right. Yeah, it's going to
why this
be,
deal with
yeah, if they have a little bit of, if they already have a deal with Plaid, then all of a sudden it's going to seem like, well, don't make a rule that's going to, wipe out our revenue in this deal or whatever. It kind of seems like there's a little bit of momentum that, hey, these two parties can work together in a free market without government intervention.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, I think
Smart
that.
move on their part.
I thought it was a very smart move on their part. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's a smart move on Plaid's part, but I don't know. I guess time will
Yeah,
tell.
it kind of struck me as funny as why would Plaid do that, unless it got like some kind of really great deal that, and it is convinced that it's gonna, the government's gonna say, yeah, you got to pay for it.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know, maybe
it's very interesting because I kind of wonder. Yeah, there's definitely some inside information there that I wouldn't have the context for because when you first talked about this story probably 3 months ago, I
right,
thought for sure that Plaid would just stand their ground because at the end of the day, it's going to be all of a sudden, whichever bank moved first. Well,
right,
the clients of that bank were going to be ticked because all of their integrations were going to stop working,
right,
and then
right.
they were going to have a big problem with that. But at the same time, I mean, that would be pretty catastrophic. I think it's interesting when you think about Plaid because Plaid doesn't really, Plaid is a platform. It's not like it's not like consumers are looking at Plaid all the time, right?
Right,
Plaid is
right.
something that's a connector. And so if all of a sudden a certain bank that was working and pulling in data stopped, I mean, that probably would be very catastrophic to their network because they would have,
Yeah,
thousands of software companies that are all of a sudden they're trying to hit the API from Plaid to get account information and it's not flowing.
right,
So I don't know. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I hadn't really thought through that when you said about it. I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Like, but
right. Yeah, but
that is actually interesting. I mean, if they're getting a deal, then there's definitely something to it. That's very interesting.
yeah, I think so. I think so as well. So, Square has announced a new simplified pricing structure, um, which is very interesting. They still have Square Free, which provides access to tools like point of sale, websites, online ordering, invoicing, and banking.
Right.
But now they have something called Square Plus, which costs $9 per month per location, with transactions priced at 2.5% plus 15 cents.
Okay.
Okay. Normally in-person transactions are 2.6% plus 15. Card not present are 2.9% plus 30.
Hmm.
And then they have something that they're calling Square Premium, which costs $149 per month per location and features, quote, nearly all of Square's software offerings, as well as 24/7 phone support, advanced reporting, things like that.
Hmm.
Processing rate is 2.4% plus 15 cents. I just thought that was interesting because, when you look at, when Square first came out, it was the free, the cheap way to do things.
Hmm.
And now when you look at that, that's pretty much on par with whatever, with what our
Hmm.
audience is charging.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, it is, but at the same time, I just can't help but wonder, like, it's such a dangerous economic strategy, because by them doing that, I mean, if there is still a coffee shop in America that is not using Square, I mean, they're absolutely like that's just the dumbest thing. I mean,
oh yeah, right,
Square is going to lose money on every single coffee shop that processes payments
right,
at that. Well, I guess not because actually, so it's not. They're not saying it's 149 and 2.4 flat. They're saying 149 2.4 plus 15 cents,
right,
right?
right.
Oh, that's interesting then. So yeah, no, even for the small, yeah, I mean, that's just really not that good of a deal.
No, it's not. I
Yeah,
mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I go to coffee shops. I go to these like little, you know, seafood shops and so forth. They're all
yeah,
using Square. These are little
hmm,
one location places,
yeah,
two location places, and I've actually said to a few of them, "Why do you use Square? Because it's cheaper." Really? Have you talked to
Yeah.
a sales rep recently? Because you can probably get at least that same deal, if not a better deal,
Hmm.
with a lot more functionality,
Well, maybe. Yeah, I think again, this is why I'm so passionate about Stackably when we rolled out because,
right?
the problem in my opinion was it's not the agents never really had this issue of competing on price with Square. The issue was they were competing on two things. They were competing on simplicity, and they were
Right?
losing on that because it was like it just isn't that simple. Square is very simple. And I don't
Right?
think people when people say it's cheaper, I think what they really mean is that it's more transparent and they know exactly what they're going to pay. It's predictable,
Yeah.
right?
Right?
Whereas when they
Right?
go to the kind of traditional ISO route, they were getting price increases all the time, and they were on this really complex pricing structure. So I think there's a transparency and a simplicity to it that's really important. But the other side is a seamless integration between the payments and the software, and
Right?
they're just really, again, other than Clover, which Clover has done a fantastic job of exploiting this. But even with Clover, when you think about it, it's very interesting because Clover, because of the nature of their network where they go like ISO centric instead of agent centric, right?
Right?
Like Clover doesn't really work with agents. Clover works with ISOs that work with agents. And
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that, there is a very disjointed merchant onboarding experience there because you're really onboarding a merchant to Fiserv, and then
Right?
you're setting up Clover. And so that's always been a bit of a friction point for them, and of course you had the cost component. And so
Right?
when we put Stackably together, Square obviously was very much on my mind with that.
Of
And
course.
a big part of it was that seamlessness of like you just create the account, and when you set up the merchant account, it also just sets up the software. And so we still have a ways to go with that one, I think, as far as, right now it's super easy to set up a merchant account. And then on the back end, our employees here at the Full Stack Payments headquarters, we're actually setting up the account for them and all that. But in a couple of months, we'll roll out the fully automated version of that's instant. So like when you go in and you complete the merchant app, then you instantly have the software you can log in and use it. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's more what Square's done that's been really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have a point there. Oh, was that a sneeze?
That was a sneeze, but I muted my mic just to help our listeners there.
I
So
know, right? Okay, so finally, James, I wanted to just touch on holiday shopping because it's already
it's
begun.
coming. Yep.
Yep. Um, Mastercard Economics Institute, which is the economic arm of Mastercard, does a lot of research with regards to spending, consumer spending, and so forth. They they're predicting that U.S. online sales growth will continue to outpace in-store shopping. No surprise there. E-commerce could grow 7.9% year over year compared to 2.3% for brick and mortar sales. In terms of real dollars, Adobe Analytics, which does its own predictions for holiday sales, is predicting consumers will spend $43.7 billion during Cyber Week alone,
Hmm.
which works out to a 6.3% jump over 2024. And both Adobe and MasterCard expect Black Friday sales to outpace Cyber Monday. So, which is, I find that interesting because Cyber Monday was
Hmm.
one of those ones that was sort of put in there when e-commerce came in, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's make this a deal. And, you know, people are sort of reverting back to, hey, I want to shop on Black Friday,
Right.
you know? And part of that is because, they're stuffed to the nines with all the food they ate the day before,
Right.
so they can sit on their couch and do their shopping
Yeah.
instead of I
Absolutely.
remember the days when people would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to stand in line at Walmart to get
Mm-hmm.
those deals, right?
Yep.
Don't have
Yep.
to do that anymore.
Right.
So, and then buy now, pay later is expected to drive $2 billion in online spend this year.
Hmm.
Adobe predicts as that's according to Adobe, um, and Mastercard said the same thing. It's not the same numbers, but the reasoning is that consumers are seeking greater flexibility in managing their budgets. I mean, prices are going up for everything, um, and buy now, pay later sort of gives you the opportunity to you know to still buy those things that you really want to without blowing your budget.
Yeah, sure.
Um, the other thing is that Mastercard's economic, and I believe Adobe as well, are predicting higher than normal gift card sales.
Mm,
Again, I think that goes with the inflation aspect. You want to give somebody something, right? You can't quite afford to give them that I don't know, Fitbit watch, for example, right?
right,
But you can give them $100 gift card and then they'll buy the Fitbit and maybe add the extra, whatever.
right,
So,
right. Hmm.
yeah, I think that, I just did a piece for the Green Sheet on holiday shopping, and then a couple more things came out this week. So, it really is looking like the season is shaping up, and people are starting to hit the stores. Whether another thing that I noticed, um, by the by, is that a lot of the online shopping, the vast majority, in fact, is going to be done with mobile devices. Now,
Hmm.
probably for you, that's not a surprise, but for me and my generation, we still sit at our desk and do it.
Yeah, right, right.
It's much easier. I have a whole heart. And I'll do that sometimes. I'll look at the phone and I'm looking for something and I'll look at the phone and then I'll go, oh, I got to go into my computer where I can see it better.
Everything. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I think what's interesting about it is though, I think on the phone, it just the bar is set a lot higher in terms of user interface. Like it's not hard to make a decent user interface on a desktop where you have all this space,
right,
but it is
right,
really hard on, I mean, on the phone, it's very difficult to make something that's user friendly, on that
right.
smaller screen. A lot of companies have done, Amazon's done a great job, obviously, but many others have too, but it is a challenge for sure. So
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Well, that's it for this week, James.
awesome. Thanks so much, Patty. Always appreciate it.
Oh, and I always enjoy it.
Thanks, Patty.
Sure.